Breaking Barriers is brought to you by Pioneer. Get higher yield potential, more pest protection, and more flexibility with Pioneer brand PowerCore Enlist corn. Plant PowerCore Enlist corn in the 100th year of Pioneer. And by Estes XPR3 Concaves. More grain, less fuel, real ROI. Learn how to optimize your combine at EstesPerformanceConcaves.com. Welcome to Breaking Barriers with R&D, your direct line to Randy Dowdy and David Hula, here to help fellow farmers unlock the potential in their fields. Are you looking to implement best practices that maximize ROI? You've come to the right place. Real value, real yield, real ROI. Breaking Barriers with R&D starts now.
Welcome to another episode of Breaking Barrier with R&D. Oh man, it is my good pleasure as always to be on the podcast with Dowdy. And, also Randy, I know you're traveling and I'm going to talk about who's shuttling you around, but we want to thank to Estes Concaves for sponsoring, and also John Deere. And I mean, not John Deere, Pioneer. See, it's only three things that make good high yielding corn: a good Lord, Pioneer, and John Deere, and then Estes Concaves, I reckon. So got to get that plug in there, Dowdy.
Oh yeah, I understand. When you get all that free stuff, you got to do what you got to do.
That's right. But as you know, Pioneer's celebrating 100 years, which is kind of neat. Not many people can say that, and we're on the 250th anniversary of the country. And I know Pioneer's got some field days, and I think I'm going to be in Princeton, Illinois next week at one of their field day events. So looking forward to it. And I'm hoping it's not as hot as you're experiencing where you're traveling right now.
Well, I can tell you, I'm in Nebraska. Been here for the last 2 days, and David, it's hot. Reminds me of South Georgia for sure. Yesterday was moderate. Today, before lunch, obviously we're driving now. We're headed to Iowa. I'm with Mike Jinks, camp host of Iowa for Total Acre, and his wife, Miss Deb. But we spent the morning in the field from about 8 o'clock to noon, 12:40, something like that. Dude, it was hot. I mean, it was hot. Everybody was drinking plenty of fluids because they were flat 100% soaking the t-shirt, and they were respiring. So we've been looking at corn and beans. It's getting dry there. Nothing's really pineapple or twisting up at this point, but they've starting to complain that the rain's kind of shut off. There's nothing really forecast for the next 2 weeks. From what I understand in Iowa, they're kind of glad that this shut off for a little bit. It's been extremely wet. But a lot of pivots were running. A lot of irrigation is making circles out there. Guys are starting to get that look that they have in the man pivots and keep diesel motors running and generators running, and starting up pivots left and right. So luckily they have them, but it's warm. There's no doubt about it. Beans are just starting to grow. They're starting to get to the point where people are recognizing that, hey, we planted this poverty pea and it's actually starting to do something. Beans are, R2, R3. There's a lot of just flowering starting to happen. And a lot of people, David, have knocked a lot of flowers off with late herbicides. I look at a soybean plant, and at V6, it should start flowering. And when I look at it and I look at the bottom of the plant, there just ain't a lot of racines and pods that's spilling. And when I start looking at it and getting just understanding where yield comes from and where it's lost, I know they're losing a lot of potential because in theory, they got 8, 9 more fruiting nodes since the bottom, when it started flowering. And every 2 to 3 days, it puts on a new node. So they should have pods at the bottom of the plant. They should have some racines potentially and a lot of flowers at the top. And that's just not what I'm seeing. Everything is almost like it's reset because a lot of people spraying herbicides and they're knocking flowers off. So it's basically like it didn't ever have anything to begin with. So that's some of what we're seeing.
So were they spraying the herbicides because they missed the herbicide spray, or they just because it was so hot and dry? Why wait later?
Well, that's a good question, David. They were spraying, V6, V7 when it started to flower. And the cool part is with tissue samples, we're able to see the impact that it's having on the tissue samples. They're spraying a herbicide, and there was one grower at V6. He sprayed that herbicide. He had just started to flower. He had just hit 6% nitrogen on those beans. And the next 3 tissue samples, all has took him down to now below 5. And the only thing he's done is spray a herbicide.
Yeah.
The only thing he's done is spray a herbicide, and he was up 6 to 5.9 the 2 prior to that. So it makes us wonder that plant has to metabolize it. Without tissue samples, you really don't know what's going on, but that plant has to metabolize that herbicide, and it's got to be doing some kind of stress to it for those nitrogen levels to drop. Because when you look at now, it's starting to recover, and now we looked at a lot of the nodules, and they're pink, they're viable, they look good, but unfortunately, they're knocking off a lot of pods, potential pods, because they're spraying when it's flowering.
Well, people say, well, heck, they're resistant to the chemistry. Well, even though they're resistant, we ran into this when Roundup beans first came out back in '96, where, we were getting that manganese yellow flash, and then people were adding manganese to it. And as well as you and I know, we in Total Acre, we kind of talk about a primer pass is, let's fix these things before we do that. But also, you're right, because when you and I were up in Canada last week, with the Agro 100 group. And we also were with Patrick and his group, Total Acre, the next day. And I vividly recall you telling the guy, the farmer that we were at, you need to have your herbicide done. And he still had one more spray to go. And, that just was just not usual and customary because they didn't know, Dowdy. And, as farmers, most of them don't stop and go check. And, with Total Acre, like you just shared, pulling tissue samples, then the growers can see the fruits of their label or the sins of, their mistakes. And I know you and I both really focus on getting it done before flowering. And, that V3 to V6 stage is a great time to get it hammered out and done. And then the other thing is, we got to start thinking about residuals too. And if guys are just doing, because we've kind of gotten that easy button, we'll just spray some Roundup, and now we're spraying some Roundup and some glufosinate or some Liberty, then we should go start coming back again. So getting a pre and then a residual post is going to help take some of that pressure off, in my opinion.
Well, David, you're right. And may get a little noisy because we're going down the interstate, but I'll do my best to hold it closer. You have to look at my ugly face closer. But you're correct. I mean, these guys are worried about weed control. Everybody likes to spray as late as possible and get shading. Everybody likes to spray as late as possible and hopefully not have to spray again. But they want to spray as late as possible. They can get coverage and then get shading and not have to spray again. And with that, they're knocking off flowers, just the way it is. And I'll be willing to bet you that these beans, when they went down from 6% nitrogen for the last 3 weeks, dropping back down to 5.25, 4.9, 4.7%, that the beans just started sitting there as opposed to just actively growing. And I suspect that part of it's happening just simply because of the fact that, obviously that plant's having to metabolize it. And now he has now made a primer pass. He is loading up in the middle third. If you got a bottom third, middle third, and the top third, the middle third's going to be loaded, but the bottom third's basically non-existent on pods right now, and that's the ones that's going to be the largest, and they're going to be the largest because of a function of time. And we obviously have recommendations that we make with Total Acre about what should be in that primer pass to retain flowers and make those pods and make the nitrogen levels go as high as possible. And he's done that, but he's going to affect the middle third and the top third at best. So that's some of the problems that farmers in general are not taken into account. They're not pushing these beans early enough, and they're not saving the potential that they could have had.
Well, speaking of pushing beans, how do things look in Georgia?
If it don't quit raining, it ain't gonna matter.
Okay.
We had 3 inches this weekend. It's 70-80% every day. The audience needs to look at 31601 on the zip code and put it in your weather app or whatever. Look at 31601 or 31778, and you will see a forecast that just is not conducive to sunny days. It's a lot of cloudy days, overcast days. David, there's even suspicion that there might be a tropical storm this weekend.
Yeah, I saw that on the news this morning. So,
I need that. Like I need to. I'm not gonna say it because I know I got a mixed audience. I got to be careful.
hey,
We don't need no more water at this point. We went from a desert with wildfires and Okefenokee swamp, people on fire, to now we went from that to a desert to really wet, put all the fires out. Now then we went back to really dry again, and now we're going to be really wet. So things have got to change pretty quick. But pod counts as strong as well water. I mean, it's good. You know, they're filling. We need some sunshine. We need some sunlight to stay there for us. Um, I poked the bear on them beans this past week when I got home Friday from being in Canada. We sprayed Saturday morning first thing. It's too hot Friday by the time I landed to go spray, but I sprayed first thing Saturday morning, and so we gave them another boost of fertility and just trying to keep them healthy. And the beans are getting fat. There ain't no doubt about it. We're in complete pod fill. Vegetative growth is done, been done for a couple weeks, and man, there's a bunch of pods, David. That's all I can say.
well, I can see that grin. All I need. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Well, you talk about spraying first thing in the morning. That brings up a great point. And I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss that. Last year when we were doing the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, we were out there and we were identifying rusts, and clearly we're not talking about soybeans now, but one of the things that both you and I mentioned while we were during the evening sessions was y'all need to leave here and just go focus on getting your airplane or helicopter or drone or ground rig and go spray for some of that southern rust. And you mentioned you spray your beans first thing in the morning. That's something that we do, and I know you do as well. Explain a little bit about why you like to do that first shot in the morning, Dowdy.
Well, obviously, we know how the plant kind of that stomata opens and closes, and we are obviously wanting to maximize that potential. And it's going to happen in the morning times, but we had quite a bit of fertility in that pass, so we really don't want any leaf burn. We're doing some things to mitigate that, but we just don't want a 98-degree day to exacerbate that. In addition, we got a little bit of rain, so the extra day worth of drying was not necessarily a bad thing either. But just cool of the day. I mean, we like to spray in the cool of the day. We have sprayed late in the evening when we know right before sunfall. We've done that in the past, but we feel like we get our best response when we spray in the morning times.
Yeah. Now, just last week when I from Canada as well, took some kryptonite up to the airport and visited with the crop duster at his facility, and we were talking. He just came in and temperatures were cooling down. We were in the mid 80s, and he probably had time for 2 more loads. And we were just looking at the forecast, and it looked like we were going to would not get a chance to spray the next 2 mornings. So I elected to go in the evening. Just like you said, just as the plant's starting to slow down, not spending so much time transpiring, and then get that product out there. And when the stomates open up, it can soak it up. But back to the southern rust, clearly we emphasize spraying in the morning if we're going to do some nutritional. But when those growers were trying to do a rescue treatment just to stop the disease, I'm not hitting the brakes. We are going to run as hard as we can, as even in the daytime, even in the heat, if we're trying to stop that kind of stop the disease. So I think you got to understand what your goal is if you're trying to influence your crop, because the leaf is not designed to pick up fertilizer. It's designed to take in transpire and photosynthesize. So here we're trying to do a little bit more. So morning time's great.
We saw some airplanes flying en route this morning and yesterday afternoon. There was people spraying in the middle of the day, just the way it was. But we saw some spraying in the mornings. But Nebraska got hit hard last year with southern rust. They got a little taste of South Georgia. And, I talked to Mike, he's sitting here with me, and I heard him tell a story today. He said, man, these fungicides it was really, he looked like a sea of green, and all his neighbors had not sprayed. If they did spray once, it had petered out. It wasn't doing them any good. He said about 16 days, it's about all they were getting out of a fungicide. And there's a lot of companies out there that will talk about getting season-long control or, 3 to 4 to 5 week control. David, that's a fallacy. I don't sell these products. I don't, get any royalties off of it, but I just know how bad southern rust is. It is hard to control. And it's not hard to control it. It's hard to control it when you spray in past 3 weeks. I can assure you that's about the best efficacy you're going to get out of it. And for Mike to say that it's like the light switch went off in 16 days of protection, it didn't matter the chemistry. From what he told me, it didn't matter if it was generics or the older chemistries that are off patent to the Cadillac treatments that are out there today. None of them was lasting more than 16 days, but all of them were better than the control. All of them were better than not having anything out there for sure. And they did a pretty dang good job on southern rust. But, he's here in 50 to 70 bushels versus his neighbors where he sprayed. And I heard some guys, you remember last year where I told you I was offering, me and you may have been together, but I know I was offering to buy a field.
Yeah.
And me pay for the fungicide last year, his latest dent. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pay for the fungicide, but I want the increase. How about that? And nobody took me up on that offer, but I had several total acre growers tell me that last application, they seen 60 bushels on where they sprayed versus where they didn't. Very common to see 40, 50. But, this was versus just say a tassel application. So them making a second application was very profitable for them and a good decision. So people seem to get amnesia from one year to the next. They don't need to forget about it. The crop was clean in Nebraska. We really didn't see, I saw some Holcus leaf spot. Really did not see any kind of disease, no gray leaf spot, nothing. But they don't need to be lulled into a stupor either. It's just now pollinating. The next 2 weeks, it looks like the jet stream is not going to send anything up from the Delta. Looks like it's going to be hot and dry. Don't look like it's going to be a real conducive environment for disease, but it looks like it shifts in a couple of weeks and starts coming up out of the Delta. Mm-hmm. If that comes to fruition, they better be ready, because maybe they don't have too short-term memory.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take advantage of this right now because there's a lot of viewers are in the Southeast. So are you seeing any southern rust down in Georgia? Because clearly it's moved from the south, from you to the Carolinas and Virginia, and then into the Delmarva area.
It's just now raising its head, and that is not usual and customary. Normally we have it hit in June, so we're behind. When we just really hadn't had much of our storms blowing up out of Florida. That's really what's going to push it up from us. It comes out of the islands and out in the Caribbean, and it comes up from there, and it pushes up out of South Florida where all of a lot of corn present, sweet corn, stuff like that. And it comes up into the Panhandle and then Georgia, and then just explodes on its own. We really have I've just heard, and I'm telling you, the chemical companies and the seed companies, you talk to ag pilots, they ain't nobody chirping about disease been spotted, because that gives them opportunity to go spray, right, and sell chemicals. So it's been a soft year in the southeast on southern rust. I've heard the deltas had their fair share of that. So that's where the pressure is going to come from. I think that Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi. From what I understand, there's a fair amount out in that area.
Yeah, well, I know, we've been doing a little bit of preventive, because we're not seeing any disease up here ourselves. No gray leaf spot, hadn't seen any blight yet, no rust at all. But I did make a couple sprays. Well, we have been spraying, um, shifted some. We've been doing Veltima, and then we shifted a little bit to Headline Amp, trying to get rid of some chemistry we had carried over. And stink bugs, finally showed up. So we were spraying to control those. Also, I think as growers are out there, you can do several things. We can look at it as a prevent spray, and then also you can use it from a standpoint of mitigating some stress. When you talk to guys out in the Nebraska where they just been hot, anything to help, reduce some ethylene production. So the fungicides might give a little bit of that ability, but the yield robber is insects. A lot of times people aren't paying attention. So piggyback that trip. And then if you're going, pull a tissue sample, it might be a chance to put on some nutrients, whether it's some nitrogen, some slow release nitrogens, or some micronutrients. I like to try to be as efficient with their dollars we can. And I know, we don't have drones around here, so we got airplanes. And Matt Crab did want me to let you know I took 573 gallons, and it worked out just perfect on the right amount of acres. He just wanted you to know that.
Hey, I don't expect him to tell me it didn't.
Right.
Still running factory concaves or an upgrade that never lived up to the promise? It may be time for Estes XPR3 concaves. Built for operators who demand more from every pass, XPR3 helps improve threshing, separation, grain quality, and crop flow in real harvest conditions. This isn't just replacement, it's a serious performance upgrade. Estes Concaves, built for operators who don't settle. Visit EstesPerformanceConcaves.com and secure your set today.
Farmers, let's talk Pioneer brand 4-seed Enlist corn.
Yes, Coach!
Wow, love the energy. Okay, it clobbers corn rootworms and weeds for higher yields.
Yes, Coach!
And 4-seed Enlist delivers next-generation corn rootworm protection.
Yes, Coach!
Plus powerful exclusive genetics and flexibility to manage tough weeds.
Yes, Coach!
Now get out there and
grow!
I guess being a Pioneer agronomist is like being a coach.
Start your best year yet at pioneer.com/rootworm.
So you got Mike in there riding with you. Is Mike seeing any tar spot? Y'all got any tar spot around?
Haven't seen any yet. No. Mike did multiple applications last year, David, and he kind of got scared that last 2 to 3 weeks. It paid marginally. But the first 2 was the ones that really did the heavy lifting. And that's what paid the bills for sure. And one thing that Mike was talking about today that I found interesting is, he's got a Hagee that he's spraying, and I'll let him tell you about the tips. Maybe I can get him on here. He's kind of bashful. But I got him hemmed up. He's driving. He can't go nowhere, David. So we're gonna manipulate him for a second. But tell us, Mike, real quick, what you're doing with your drops, or how you're spraying and getting better coverage with a ground rig.
Well, we just basically switch. So we're on 15-inch spacing. So the one nozzle runs right over the row. And if the corn is tall, obviously the plant has a tendency to get, folded over. And so the one nozzle basically is being blocked by the plant. So what we did was we swapped and went to bigger tips between the rows. So we're putting 1/3 over the row and 2/3 between the row. And, there was people around us last year that sprayed with the drone that were doing the lighter gallons, and they sprayed multiple times. And even that stuff, yeah, they kept the top screen, but they had disease problems down low, and it eventually killed the plant. Whereas where we were basically able to cover the plant clear to the ground last year with that real bad rust infestation, we never got infected. And that, I think, really, we never got the spores, whatever, working. We were able to keep that at bay. And I think really that coverage was key for us last year. And so that's the plan this year. It's 2/3 between the row and 1/3 over the row.
Well, I think that's great information because, fungicides, wherever it comes in contact with the leaf, fungicides don't have the usual ability to translocate down. They protect that leaf and move up. So, Mike, I'm glad to hear that was working out for you because that just symbolizes what is actually going on. And the drones, if you want to get somebody excited, go to Matt Crabb's aviation website or Facebook page. I guess I'm not on social media, but he did a thing there talking about drones and the pattern width and which they need to be maintaining and trying to get coverage down in the canopy. So that'd be a good place for people to look at. But it is important. You got to get it down as deep as you can. And I would venture to say most air tractor guys, they're wanting that 1.5 gallon, 2 gallon range. Dowdy, I don't know how many gallons you use with airplane, but I'm 4 plus the chemistry. So we could be as much as 4.5 gallons. Costs a little more. I was out in the field today where he's made a spray 2 days ago, and we were 2 leaves below the ear leaf. So that's pretty important.
Sure. And you know how they get that canopy, penetration. I mean, they just got a lot of downforce coming off its wing tips. I'm assuming. I'm not a aviation specialist, but when it's great to hear, I've sprayed some corn. I hadn't sprayed very much post-tassel, but I've sprayed quite a bit pre-tassel. And Mike's just thinking differently there. If we look at leaf architecture of the varieties we plant, there's a lot of leaves that have from the ear leaf up that are really upright canopy. And by all means, we got to protect the ear leaf. So with him spraying the middles with 2/3 of the rate and the 1/3 in the top, that just makes good walking around sense to me, David. Because now he's able to get good coverage on the ear leaf and below. And, the ear leaf's what's driving the boat at this point. You know what I mean? So I like the way he was thinking with him doing that. I mean, obviously, he felt like part of it wasn't getting good coverage just simply because the plant's so dang tall, right? And he couldn't get so much coverage because the booms couldn't go so much high above the stalk itself. So him spraying in the middles was able to get more of that whole plant. And he just said that point blank, it was like he was in the island. You got any drone photos of that by chance, or any pictures of that? Where everybody was dead around you and you were green?
I think they have posted some stuff on the Iowa Total Acre Instagram page.
I think we got some stuff on the Iowa, according to Deb and Mike, about the Iowa Total Acre page on Instagram, where maybe they got some photos of what it looked like around them. So
Brian Maddox posted some stuff somewhere.
yeah, I got you. He's saying Brian Maddox posted some pictures, but regardless, fungicides work. You just got to get good coverage on them, and that's the key.
Yeah. Now, there are some other things that are options out there. 360, they have the wide drops and they got what's called the undercover. And then I know the easy drop folks are working on something too. They were going to do something at the farm, but I don't know. I didn't want to be an alpha tester or a beta tester this year. So we just opted to let them learn somewhere else. And then we'll try it when it works, just to try to get that coverage down deeper in the canopy with another tool.
Yep. So I followed up on your question about, the latest and greatest push by Precision is to talk about the aerotube and the seed orientation and all that. So I drilled one of the guys that was in the camp today putting a little more pressure on trying to find answers. you and I normally beta test a lot over the years for them, and we are not beta testing that this year. But it's not a new idea. It's not a novel idea, but it's one that can give us yield in the future. But from what I have been told by you and them, that they've improved performance of the speed tube by using the arrow tube to try to get better spacing and consistency. That frankly, John Deere's got the upper hand on right now with his height emerge. The corn is very good from what I'm being told on spacing, the leaf orientation. He says, man, it's very noticeable. He had 2 rows. He did it on the outside rows, so he'll have 4 rows when he gets ready to harvest it. He's going to do a planter variability test, and he's going to harvest 1 row at a time across each one of them to see what it does across the whole width of the planter, to see where the yield's coming from and how much yield it was. He's going to do it with the combine. But he says you can definitely see planter performance improvement on singulation and spacing with the arrow tube, and as a benefit, they're getting some of the leaf orientation across the row. I don't know if they're as great as 80%. He said, I don't know that we're that high, he says, but I really haven't done the plant counts. But he did say that it's noticeable. So I asked the follow-up question, did it help on the beans? And he said, it don't have the same performance on the beans that the corn has today. So maybe that's a setting. He was afraid that part of that could have been the talc that he used. He's not certain of that piece of it. I know they have a specific recommendation on certain graphite or talc to use. And he says, maybe that's where I made a mistake on the bean side. But he don't have the performance today on the beans that he did on the corn. Corn looks good. He's happy with the way it performed on the corn. So I know that might be interesting to some of the audience, but I know you had asked that question to me, and I wanted to follow up, give you that answer.
Yeah, no, that's good because, growers, I find myself, Dowdy, you're a first generation farmer. So new shiny paint might not seem as exciting to you, but, having a new pickup, that new smell. But as a grower, oftentimes most growers gravitate towards newer technologies. They want something new because they want to try something. And, having researched the seed orientation 20 plus years ago and hand planting seed and seeing it and seeing what it can do, I mean, we can clearly pick up bushels there, some cheap bushels. And then as we pursue it even more with, matching the right hybrids, we can see some advantages. But while you and I were in Canada, there was a grower that had all the bells and whistles. He didn't have the arrow tube, but he had everything else on his planter that you could possibly have. And you could even have the arrow tube. If it's not set properly from start to finish, doesn't mean you're going to have a great result. So I want to caution people. This is not a time to just go out and spend some monies and pick up some cheap bushels. I think we really got to be cognizant, because I don't know how the fields you're walking in, but we've been working with growers and they don't want us talking about a planter anymore. I mean, they feel like they got that box checked, but how many times do we go out there and the planter is still the problem? Now they can do to improve their crop, but they're only influencing a certain percentage of their crop. And the arrow tube is just one of those technologies that for certain growers, they're going to see a big advantage. Other growers, there are too many other things that they need to address before they get into that. And, when we were in Canada, the farmer said, hey, my stand's not very good. And you snuck away for a little bit and you went and looked at a planter. So, and we spent a lot of time talking about it while we were there in Canada for that field day we were at.
And David, you told me in the first planting tour that Iowa and Nebraska, and Illinois, and all of them had done a better job on germination depth. Well, I didn't see that, not the last 2 days. We might find a plant that may touch 2 inches germination depth, but when we dug 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plants in a row, David, it didn't stay there. We saw as much as an inch to an inch and a quarter difference down the road, 5, 6, 7 feet. And today we could see, was it 3/4 of an inch difference, Mike? I think we had 3/4 of an inch difference today in 5 plants. 5 plants at 28,000 plants per acre. I mean, what is that? 2.5, 3 feet? In 5 plants, seed depth changed, 3/4 of an inch where we were at this morning. Yesterday was a solid inch, inch and a quarter. Inch and an inch and a quarter. We'd have some at 2 1/4, but then there was some at an inch. David, I don't understand. I understand why it's not that way, but farmers aren't catching this. Farmers aren't doing a very good job. And that's something that I'm back to talking about the planter again. I don't like talking about it, but that box has got to be checked, and it's just not being checked the way it should be.
Well, I guess when I was in Nebraska and in Iowa during the pre-tassel tour, like better farmers, so they had that, so we didn't have to spend time talking about it.
There
So,
you go. Well, I was at one farm in Ohio. I don't know, like the first round, and I'd been to this guy's farm multiple times. He started me talking about, germination depth, and we went to his field. I dug some plants. He knew what I was going to do. And I said, let's check some depth. Let's see what we got. And he knows I can't bring a seed depth checker because TSA seems to think that that's a weapon of some sort. So he takes and he's looking at when I'm holding the plant up after the roots have been washed. I can still find the seed, and he can kind of look at it and tell if he's an inch and a quarter from the bottom of the crown to the top of the seed just by looking at it. He kind of gauges. But if it looked shallow, he had a different seed depth checker ready for me. He had filed off 3/8 of an inch on it. He was hoping that I wasn't going to check that, not notice the difference. So he had a seed depth checker. If it looked like it was good, he's going to give me that one. So I'd say, good job, it's the right depth. If it looked a little shallow, he's going to give me a seed depth checker that had been filed off, rounded off, made it look like it was supposed to. They got a good laugh out of that. But there are guys paying attention, and there are guys that are planting 2 3/4 inches, David, to try to get that depth. But it's not just about simulating that germination depth or that settling that's affecting germination depth. It's also about doing the rest of it to make sure you maintain that.
Yeah.
And that's a lot about what we're talking about the total acre. That's part of that 1 through 9 we discussed at length about how to ensure all crops come up at the same time and maintain that 2-inch germination depth. So we spent some time on that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and as a grower who's been planting corn for 30 some years now, and looking at the T handle, I don't, even on that John Deere planter, I don't have many notches to go any deeper. Most of them I'm 2 on one side, 1 on the other. Now some of them are a little off because just the settings, and each T handle shouldn't be in the same holes if you check it. I mean, it should be, but most time it doesn't work out that way. So with that, I want to talk a couple things about going on, what's happening here in Virginia. We got a little bit of rain last weekend because we've been dry. We were hot when we were up in Canada. We were hot down here in Virginia, getting into those 100 degree heat indexes, night times in the 70s, usually around 72 to 75. To me, somewhere around that 74 is a magic number for being cool or getting the lows. But here at the home farm, sitting that Friday before the 4th, so 3rd, I was seeing dolphins out on the river. So that's not a good sign. And we've been pumping some sodium, pulling tissue samples, and my sodium levels are higher. And you know what that does? That kind of blocks potash. And going out in the field, we're seeing it. You can see some early potash deficiencies, and so now we transition to some foliar stuff to try to overcome some of these shortcomings. But we need water, and you can't flush sodium out with more sodium water. So yeah, we're just mitigating, watching how we irrigate outgoing tides. We'll start irrigating on low tides towards the end of this week. just try to get us through. And there's another chance of rain this weekend, so we're praying for that. And then, the Western farm, we're in good shape. That's not a problem. Salt's not going that far upriver. But we double crop beans. We got some of the finished herbicides and doing a little bit of touch up on a few spots where some Johnson grass has come back. So we're hitting that. It's not blooming. We're getting dangerously close though, these double crops. So we're trying to knock that out. And I had that experiment of 75-day corn. I was hoping to pick corn before you did, but we didn't turn that 75-day into like a 90-day for some reason. She just doesn't want to dry down. And it's going to mitigate her double crop scenario. Like I was telling Tyne when she was out, we were going to pick the corn and then plant beans behind it. Unfortunately, we might plant beans the last week of July or the 1st of August. So not excited about that. And so just a little update what's happening in Virginia. And we're cleaning oats pretty hard. We're cleaning those black oats right now. So we got a big demand for those for cover crop.
How long you think it'd be before you get to irrigate at your house?
Well, we're gonna turn the pivot on again tonight. We're doing it on outgoing tides and low tides. They got some rain upstream. It just hasn't gotten down to us yet because we're still seeing the salt index is a little higher. But
so educate me for a second. Is that 6 hours in between high and low tide?
Yeah,
you'll get to irrigate.
We're doing 2 to 3 hours in front of the low tide and a couple hours after the low tide, and you get 2 low tides every day. So we really don't want to irrigate when it's going to be super hot. So we're gonna pump water tonight, and after a while, after about a week or so, if the salt gets too high, then we just irrigate for 2 hours during that low, the slack tide, an hour in front, an hour behind. That's not something we do all the time. It's just when it gets dry, we've just learned because we don't have the fresh water. And when you start, they talk about putting sodium on your soil, you're going to sterilize the dirt. We get enough rain in the wintertime to flush that sodium out. That or we'll put some gypsum out there to help flush it out. But it does create a problem uptake on potash. And because of the ions and sodium, and it replaces, and it's easier to pick up the sodium and it blocks the potash. So you will see some potash deficiencies. And I can assure you there is enough potash to grow the crop to where there would not be any deficiencies. And we're seeing it. So foliar applications are what we're going to do. And we talked about putting some on through the pivot, but it's hard to get excited about pumping the salt with salt water because we're just going to ask for it. So we don't.
Now, will you run that pivot wide open for those 2 hours, or you just run it for 2 hours on a 1/2 inch or whatever rate it is, and then just shut it off and pick back up from there?
Yeah, we're going to run it. We're focusing on the high yield stuff right now. So we'll put a 4/10 down so we can get it done because that pivot takes about 12 hours to put a 1/2 inch down. So we got a big enough pump. So we'll do half the field and then the other half we'll catch up. But we're kind of trying to focus on this higher yield environment because there's just more plants out there, trying to keep it cool. And then the other half, it gets water. So we should.
One thing I want you to do, pay attention. You're not able to water the way you want to, and you got high nighttime temperatures. Start paying attention, and especially in Nebraska and different places, Indiana, Michigan, Delaware. If they're listening, they need to listen to what I'm about to tell them. Start paying attention to those lower leaves. When we get high nighttime temperatures, the natural way for that plant to cool itself is to have sufficient potassium. And you're showing some potassium deficiency already. The part I want to understand is with the nighttime temperatures where they are, the heat the way it is during the day, and you're not able to water like you would normally do. Tell me when you start to see those lower leaves, just the bottom 5 or 6 leaves start to want to just relax and lay down. They'll still be green, but see when they start to lay down. And once they start to lay down, cigar's supposed to get smoked.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you're going to see some of that. So try to notate that, David. Here I am telling the guy that makes 600 bushel corn, something to pay attention to, but we get this nighttime temperatures that's hot all the time. We get a lot of, rainfall at different times that'll flush out potash. More rain we want at any given time. But just when these temperatures get hot like this, and that plant can't cool itself down like you would normally do it, use the plant having enough sufficient water to naturally cool itself. See if you see those lower leaves starting to want to droop. And if they start to droop, they ain't coming back up. I don't know a little blue pill for them yet. But I can just tell you, I'm curious as what you'll see, because you're in a little different world than you've been used to lately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly we're hotter and we got a little bit more hot nighttime temperatures than we typically see. It's just not being able to cool it down. And you're right, the whole function of the potash, standability, but helping that plant transpire. That's key. But it takes water. As you well know, I've heard you talk about how much water it takes to move potash, from a dry form into the plant. And I'm a believer in it. That's why we spend so much time talking about base side of potash, how important that can be as a grower. Some of the things that we talk about with total acre in great lengths. So where are you're going to Iowa. That's the direction you're headed. You'll be there this evening and tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going Cedar Rapids. Is that right?
Cedar Falls.
Cedar Falls. Cedar something. We're going to Cedar Falls, Iowa. We had a 4.5 hour drive when we got on the road. And we're headed there. We'll be in Iowa all day tomorrow. And then I think Friday morning, then I get a Friday afternoon flight going back home to Georgia. So, and I'm just hoping it'll quit raining. Nathan went down to the farm that was planted March 2nd, 3rd. And he said they mowed around the edges of the field. And when these water puddles standing in sand, it's wet. When these water puddles standing in sand, it's wet. And
either wet or we got compaction, one or the other. But if it's on the edge, so I'm not saying.
I can assure you, it's wet. We've had enough water now that it's just saturated. It's just no doubt about it. It's raining every day.
Yeah.
The corn's done what it's going to do, but now we need to get it out of the field. So we'll see. But David, it's always good to talk to you, man. There's been a lot of information growers could benefit from today's conversation. As you say, thanks for the time cage. Thanks for Pioneer being a sponsor. Obviously, they've both been good to us on our farms for sure. And just performance on the Estes concaves. Pioneer's done well for us on our farm many years. So we're looking forward to getting things harvested and getting those crops behind us to get rid of some of this risk that we got out there with all these hurricanes that's starting to get on everybody's mind. So we're ready to get this crop out of here. But it's always my good pleasure to be with you, David. Thank you. Had to have Mike let you say some parting words. Good. Say hard.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So, well, Mike and Bev, it's great seeing y'all. You're fortunate to have the A team with y'all today. And and Dowdy, like you said, thanks to Estes and Pioneer. I'm going to be in Princeton, Illinois next week at their field day. So anybody that's looking to go to Pioneer's website, they got these century field days across the country. So take advantage of it if you can. And may God bless everybody. And, I like to say, may God bless the seeds you sow. May everybody be safe too. So thanks for your time, Dowdy.
All right, man. Take care of yourself. Can't stay in that house too much longer. Miss Sandy's going to put you to work.
I'm out of here as soon as we're done. I can assure you.
Oh, jump in the pool before you leave now. It's probably pretty hot out there. So,
all right.
Take care. See you, man.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another new episode of Breaking Barriers with R&D. Be sure to like and subscribe. And remember, all episodes are available on Farm Journal TV and anywhere podcasts are found.